everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin and for today's video we're going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of November. So in the month of November I read a total of 9 books, which I am really pleased with. Toward the end of November I really didn't read that much, so the fact that most of this took place within the first 3/4 of the month I'm pretty pleased with. It's definitely more than I was anticipating reading. A couple of them were required for school, but November is also the month where I completed my Goodreads challenge for the year, which is so exciting. I have never read 100 books in a year. The most I had ever read previous was the amount that I read last year, and I read 83, I believe, and I'm currently sitting at 103, so I'm feeling pretty good about that, pretty proud. I genuinely wasn't sure if I was going to be able to read 100 books this year, so that's really cool considering that I changed my goal from 70 to 100 halfway through the year, added 30 more books. But yeah, so let's just dive in because like I said, I did read 9 books and I have a lot of thoughts on them. I don't know why my voice keeps cracking. Also, the month of November simultaneously dragged on and went by in the blink of an eye. I legit don't know how we're in December already. So I'm going to be looking at my laptop for the notes that I took throughout the month while I was reading all of these books as I finished them, so that I can give you more accurate synopsis and coherent thoughts on all of the books. So the first book was one that I actually read for school, and that is The Sorrow Proper by Lindsay Drager. So like I said, I read this for my English class and I actually really enjoyed it. This is kind of a weird novel. We're following 3 different perspectives, primarily 2 perspectives. So we're following a photographer, a deaf mathematician, and then we are following this set of 4 librarians. So those are our main kind of perspectives, the 2 and then the librarians, and the 2 are kind of lovers, which is why they're grouped together. So this is not something that I would have picked up on my own, obviously. There are some books that I've read for class that like I may have and that I've seen other people have as required reading that I would pick up, but this is not one of them. This is definitely a very literary book and took me a decent amount of time considering the fact that it's not very long. And you'll also see I dog-eared quite a few pages. Dog-earing is not something that I generally do, but when it comes to my class books, I have a very different approach to the way that I read. So I will tend to dog-ear pages that I think would be beneficial for me to go back and reference later for the paper that I'm gonna have to write. It's just so much easier to find. And since this isn't a book that like I would have read anyway, I don't want to, I'm gonna use a word that's gonna sound harsh, but I don't want to waste my like sticky tabs and everything like that on a book that is for school and I might not like when I could use them for a book that I might really love. So I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing, but whatever. This book was mildly confusing, and that might be just because I'm not very intellectual and because it's just so like dense a little bit, because like I said, this did take me a decent amount of time to read considering the size. Typically if this was like a young adult contemporary or something, I would fly through it. And I don't know what genre necessarily to categorize this as, because my professor looked at the genres that it is classified as on like Kindle or whatever, and one of them was like time travel, which is not something that I would use to classify this book. This book had a lot of quotes in it that I really liked. It's got a lot of themes that are heavy on loss and grief and coping and just how to continue with your life when you have either lost something or you are in the process of losing something or someone. And so it was really interesting. Like I said, so many quotes. I really enjoy this. I don't remember if I gave it a 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, but this is definitely one of the better books that I've had to read for class, and I'm really glad that I read it, and I'll definitely keep it and go back and reread the quotes that I have in this book for the rest of time, just because they're so thought-provoking, and there was so much that I wanted to write with this essay that I had to do, and it's my favorite paper that I've ever been assigned, which was really interesting. So I don't generally like writing papers. The next book that I read in the month of November, I listened to on audiobook, and that is The Night Swim by Megan Golden. There must be something wrong with me, because so many people who have read this book say it's so dark and there are a lot of content warnings, which there are, and this book is pretty dark. but I was expecting darker, like I don't know why. And it did take me a while to get through. I think I gave this book like 3 stars, and I feel really bad and like messed up for doing that. But I didn't really resonate with all of the characters, and I didn't think it was like that extremely dark. I wasn't super invested in the story. The plot twist at the end was a really big surprise to me, and I really like enjoyed that surprise. Not enjoyed it because I should probably tell you what it's about. This book is about a girl who has her name is Rachel. She has a really well-known podcast, and it's like a crime podcast, and it like got really popular within its first season. So people started copying her, and for her 3rd season, she is going to be investigating a case as it's happening. She is investigating a rape case of a girl who's like 16, I want to say. It happened in high school with the guy who was like the star swimmer on the team, and nobody believes her. I mean, some people believe her, but not everyone. And then there's like another rape case that is brought in with this one, and they're somehow connected, and it's really dark. I say that it's really dark because it is, but at the same time, like I was expecting way worse. I think I just like expected these really graphic scenes, and not to say that the scenes aren't horrifying and will turn your stomach, but I think I was expecting like everything to be laid out, and that was going to make me uncomfortable, but that wasn't the case, luckily. Editing Aaron, of course. Editing Aaron is here just to pop in quickly while Athena growls at nothing, and say that something that I forgot to mention is, while I didn't really connect to the characters of this story, and I found the plot to be slow at some points, and most people will probably disagree with me, which is totally fine, something that I did absolutely love, and I think more books should include, is the conversation about rape. And specifically, there was a line in there about how, sorry, I got a text, about how murder is always wrong, but there is like a gray area with rape, and how that doesn't make any sense. So I did love the conversation that was there, and I appreciate what the book did in that regard, and I obviously can acknowledge that this is a really good book. It just wasn't one for me. So just wanted to add that in because I forgot to say it. And I'll probably be popping in a lot, sorry. It was really good, and most people do not share my opinion. Everybody seems to think that this is super dark, and that's valid. It is dark. I was just like prepared for the absolute worst, and it wasn't the absolute worst depiction I've ever seen. So I don't know. I'm weird, and there's something wrong with me, and I need to go back to therapy. I still really recommend The Night Swim if you think you would be comfortable reading everything given its material and subject matter, because like I said, most people give this a 4 out of 5 stars. 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, excuse me. I am an oddity. The next book that I read in the month of November was a graphic novel, and that was Monstrous Volume 2 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. This is the second volume in the graphic novel series Monstrous. This one is called. It's a very rich fantasy, kind of horror, steampunk world that is super interesting, and I believe inspired by Asian history. I don't exactly remember if it was a specific Asian country or just like generally speaking. I heard that comparison. I don't remember where from either, so excuse me, a little fuzzy on the details. I read volume 1 last year and really enjoyed it. I believe I gave it a 4 or a 5 out of 5 stars, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Because it had been a while, I was a little bit confused at points, and not all of the details are given to you right away, and I'm so used to reading young adult fantasy that I'm very used to the info dump, and I find that to be very helpful. And so because we don't get that with this series, I'm a little confused a lot of the time. That being said, this is such a rich world, the art style is absolutely incredible, and the storyline is just mind-blowing. So I would highly recommend this. Like I said earlier, I am just not that smart. We also learned a lot more about the history in this volume, which I thought was super cool. I'm not good at explaining this, so as per usual, I'll have all of the books linked in the description below so that you can kind of look at reviews and read more about the synopses of each of them. I am super duper excited to continue on with this series. The next 2 volumes are on my TBR for this month and I cannot wait to get to them. So the next book that I read was a horror manga, and it's also the longest book that I've read all year, but it's one that I've been wanting to read all year, and that is Tommy by Junji Ito. Like I said, this is a horror manga. A lot of people have been picking up Junji Ito more and more recently, at least people that I follow and that I've noticed. This book follows a girl who can seduce men into doing her bidding, but typically her bidding is for them to kill her after she drives them insane. And then once she dies, she comes back to life and does it all over again. And that's basically the entire book. It just keeps happening all over again. And the ways that these men kill her are horrifying. And she's like instructing them to do it. So this is definitely horror, definitely gory, but it's not very like jump scare thriller-y. There are definitely parts that are creepy, and if I read it too late at night, I'd be like, need to set this down for a little bit, otherwise I'm gonna have nightmares of creepy things happening to me. And I don't want that. I want to be able to enjoy my sleep. But yeah, this was so interesting and a surprisingly quick read given the fact that it's 752 pages long. And I'm so excited to continue on with Junji Ito's other collections because people say that this is not his strongest. Uzumaki, I believe, is his strongest, and so I'm really excited to get to that one. But I did really enjoy this. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I wasn't expecting it to be like the same story over and over again. I mean, it was a little bit different each time, but it was essentially the same. But I wish that there was kind of like a thicker plot to it, if that makes sense, especially given the size. The next book that I read in the month of November was, I believe, my favorite book of the month, and that is In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think I was gonna like this book, but it was a 5 out of 5 stars. It's about this girl who goes on a family vacation, obviously with her family for Christmas, and they go to this cabin with some family friends, and they're celebrating Christmas, whatever, and as they're leaving, they get into a car accident and her day starts over again. Because at the beginning of the trip, or not at the beginning, but at the end of the trip and at the beginning of the book, she makes a big mistake. And she gets a chance to redo it. And she gets a chance to redo it a couple of times, but those few times happen at the very beginning of the book, so it's not like you get 3 days in, reset, 3 days in, reset again, 4 days in, reset again, because that would have been so annoying for me to read. But I really, really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's my favorite holiday book that I've ever read, and it's my favorite Christina Lauren book that I've ever read. With their past few releases, I haven't really been a big fan, but this one, it just kind of like re-solidified them as one of my favorite romance contemporary authors again, and that makes me so happy because I genuinely do enjoy so many of their books. I wasn't sure that I was going to like the whole Groundhog Day trope thing, but I loved it, and I think it was just really well done. I don't think that if it had been done any differently, I probably wouldn't have liked this as much as I did. So I think I still have I'm right to be reserved about reading those books in the future, but I loved this one and they did such a good job. Something else I really appreciate about this book is that the characters were really good at communicating. Obviously, there were some issues, there were conflicts because it's a book. There has to be a conflict of some kind. But I still, I don't know, I felt like the miscommunication that happened was very genuine and authentic, and it made sense to the plot. It wasn't just like have a conversation, because the frustrations that each of the characters were having were very valid in my opinion. So even with the tiny bit of conflict that, I don't want to say tiny bit of conflict, but even with the conflict where they needed to talk it out, it didn't bother me and I didn't view that really as miscommunication. The next book that I had to read was, again, one for class, and that is Proof by David Auburn. This is a one-act play. and it's kind of like a drama. It's pretty short. I read it in like 40 minutes or something like that. It's enjoyable. It's nothing crazy. I definitely enjoyed it more the first time I read it because I didn't know what was going on, and so that made everything like way more surprising and suspenseful and everything. But it wasn't bad. Yeah, I don't know. It was just like, okay. I think I would give this like 3 stars. The first time I read it, it was a higher rating, but I think I just enjoyed that experience more. It was a play. I don't tend to read a lot of plays. It's kind of neutral, and I can't really tell you what this is about because it's a 1-act play and it's super short, and if I gave you even a little bit of a summary, it would spoil the whole thing. So the next book that I read was a graphic novel called Hey Kiddo by Jared Hay. I don't know how to pronounce his last name and I don't want to screw it up, so I apologize, but it's on the screen. So this is like a graphic memoir of this kid's life, and Jarrett, sorry. It's a graphic novel of this kid's life. He is now an adult man, and how people in his life dealt with substance abuse and being in rehab, and how his mom was in and out of his life very frequently, and that was really difficult for him, and how the substance abuse and all of that affected him personally. It was interesting, but I wasn't connected to it. I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more had I read it physically because I listened to the audiobook. That being said, the audiobook is so well produced, and I don't think it's a bad reading experience, but I would recommend having the physical copy there with you while you listened to the audiobook. So it wasn't bad. I don't feel comfortable rating it because like this is his life and he worked really hard on it, and you hear how much he like values his art and puts so much time into it, and so I don't want to bash it, but I just wasn't connected to this. It wasn't the one for me. But that being said, I don't think it's bad and I would recommend it to people. It just wasn't my cup of tea. The 8th book that I read in the month of November was Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. I think I gave this either a 3 or 4 out of 5 stars. I read like the first 30% of it back in April, maybe? I don't know. This is following 2 points of view. So we have Morgan, who is this woman who has a daughter. Her name is Clara, whose perspective we also get. And she had her daughter Clara when she was 17 years old, and Clara's dad and Morgan end up getting married, and then one day Morgan's sister Jenny and Chris, who is Clara's dad and Morgan's husband, end up getting into a car accident and dying, and that just kind of upends her and Clara's life, especially with something that they find out, which I thought was pretty obvious. And the book just kind of goes from there. It's very cheesy and predictable in my opinion. It wasn't bad, and I thought that the ending was really cute, the very ending. It was just kind of okay in my opinion. Definitely not Colleen Hoover's best work, but I'm trying to make my way through her backlist, and so I wanted to read this one and it sounded interesting. Plus my sister-in-law said that she really enjoyed it, so I wanted to try it for that. Not my favorite by Colleen Hoover, not the worst, but whatever. I'm glad that I read it. I wouldn't take it back, and there are some things that I've like highlighted while I was reading that I really enjoyed, just some of the quotes and everything, but I don't know that I would recommend this one necessarily. It's not bad, but it's just not Colleen Hoover's best. And the last book that I read in the month of November was A Christmas Date. I don't remember who this is by. It's a very short Christmas like novella that I listened to on Scribd. It's like 4 hours long on 1x speed. This is about a girl who is not a big fan of the holidays in general because that means she has to see her family, and with that she has to see her sister who stole the man that she loves. And so this year when she is going home for Christmas, she decides to hire someone to be her boyfriend, basically like a really serious boyfriend, so that she can take him home, make her sister jealous, and hopefully they can kind of swap husbands, or not husbands, but boyfriends. It was interesting. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. There was a lot of lead up to the romance that took place because it's like a fake dating trope, and that was interesting. And you have to share a bed trope, all of that kind of stuff. It was a solid romance Christmassy read, but like the romance part of it was lacking. I got through 60% of the book before they even kissed. And the fact that this is a 4-hour long audiobook on 1x speed, and it took 60% of the book for them to even kiss, and then you also had the conflict take place in the last 40% and the wrapping up of that, it just, the ending was rushed, the romance was rushed, and like, it went from no attraction to them like kissing and then sleeping together within a day. And like, that's fine, but they had known each other for 2 weeks and there was no attraction, and then all of a sudden you're in love with him. Obviously people are entitled to their own choices, but the pacing didn't make any sense to me. I hope that doesn't come across as me saying, like, sounding like that's not okay. Do whatever you want, whatever, that's fine. The pacing doesn't make any sense. You knew him for 2 weeks and you're like, not for me, still in love with my sister's fiance, to, oh my gosh, this is the love of my life, I'm gonna spend forever with him. In a day? You woke up not caring, you went to sleep in love. No thank you. Work on it. That's my November wrap up. That took a really long time, but I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know how you did in the month of November. I feel like I don't say this enough on my channel. If you read half of one book, good on you for reading. That is so impressive. If you read 20 books in the month, good on you. That is impressive. It doesn't matter how much you read or how little you read. That's pretty much all I have for this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you read in the month of November, or if you plan on reading any of these books. I really had a good time reading in November, and I'm hoping that December is just as good of a reading month. Actually, I'm hoping it's better because I have a lot of books on my TBR. I'll have my December TBR linked down below in the description if you're at all interested. But as I've said for the millionth time, that's it. That's all I have for this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I really hope you're doing well, reading, mentally, and otherwise, and staying safe. COVID numbers are rising, so don't forget to wear your mask and take care of yourself and your loved ones, please. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.